Hey, what's up? In this video, I will teach you a skill that can double or even triple your income as a web designer this 2025, design systems. Understanding how design systems work and having the ability to create them from scratch, it's what separates okay designers who struggle to land paid projects from brilliant designers who get work opportunities all the time. When you think systematically and deliver excellence, businesses will love you. And here is the thing, you can even create a very well-crafted design system and you can sell it. You can turn it into a product and sell it for $100, $500, even $1,000 plus per purchase, creating a nice ongoing revenue stream. Here is the content of this video: understanding Figma variables, how to build a design system from scratch step by step, and an introduction to component documentation. Let's begin. In this lesson, we are diving into one of Figma's most powerful features, variables. If you have ever found yourself making repetitive changes across designs, this is about to change your workflow dramatically. By the end of this lesson, you will know what Figma variables are, why they are essential for creating scalable, consistent designs, and how to implement them in your projects. I will walk you through real-world examples, common use cases, and some best practices to help you save time and stay organized as a web designer. Before we begin, I want to remind you to approach this lesson with curiosity. Variables may seem like a small detail, but mastering them can make a big difference in how effectively and efficiently you work. Before we continue, I wanted to invite you to the Web Designers Collective. This is a community that I created a few months ago, and we are already 700 members, which is crazy. And here is where you will find your people, other designers in different career stages. And you will also find multiple agency owners. And here in the classroom section, you will acquire knowledge and you will have access to a bunch of exclusive resources. It's totally free to join, but we are very selective with who we let in. However, applying takes less than 1 minute, and being a member can change your life. So make sure you do it. And when you apply, make sure you mention that you come from YouTube. That way you will have priority. Go to webdesignerscollective.com and join us today. It's free. Let's continue with the lesson. We'll go through a brief introduction so you can understand what variables are. So, what are variables? Variables in Figma allow you to store reusable values, such as colors, textiles, or other design tokens that you can apply across your designs. Think of variables as central building blocks that help you maintain consistency and make your workflow more efficient. For example, instead of manually updating a button across dozens of designs, you can link it to a variable, then change the variable, and then the updates apply to all the designs automatically. And you might be wondering, isn't that what components do? Variables and components serve different purposes in design systems, but work best when used together. Variables store reusable design values like colors, typography, or spacing, and are applied to elements consistently. For instance, a variable named brand primary colors might be used for key branding elements like the background of call to action buttons, links, or accents in headers, ensuring a cohesive look across the design. Components, on the other hand, are reusable design elements with structure and styling, such as buttons or cards. And when you update a component, all its instances reflect the changes. So basically, variables manage design details while components reuse design structures. By combining them, such as using a color variable within a button component, you can ensure consistency, scalability, and efficiency in your designs. Alright, so why use variables? Number one, saving time. No more repetitive edits. Make one change and it applies everywhere. Number two, ensuring consistency. Keeps your colors, typography, and other design elements uniform across projects. Number three, enabling scalability. Easily adapt designs for dark or light mode, multiple brands, or responsive needs. Number four, simplify collaboration. Team members can understand and use your design system more effectively. Figma variables come in 4 fundamental types: number, used for spacing values, grid sizes, dimensions, opacity levels, and any other numeric properties. And then we have color, used for brand colors, theme values, background colors, and any other color-based design tokens. And then we have string, used for text content, labels, placeholder text, and any reusable copy across designs. And then finally we have Boolean, used for true-false states, controlling element visibility, and managing conditional design variations. While variables can be used within text styles, Figma's typography, and text styles feature is a separate tool in the design system, specifically for managing font properties like size, weight, and line height. Now let's see how variables work. Figma variables are organized into collections that define their scope. So we have local collections available in a single file, and then we have published collections. And these are shared across multiple files. Variables support different modes, like light or dark themes, allowing a single variable to hold multiple values that adapt dynamically based on the selected mode. Variables are applied through the Properties panel and automatically update all link references when modified. So basically, variables in Figma are more flexible than components. When you change a variable, the update applies everywhere that the variable is used. Components are reusable design elements. When you change a component, it updates all instances of that component, except for any instances that have been detached or overridden. Alright, so now here in Figma, I will show you how to create variables. The first thing we have to do is click on the canvas, and then here in the Properties panel where it says Local Variables, we click, and then this window will pop up. Now we click here on Create Variable, and then Color. This color will be created by default, and then since this is one of our brand colors, we can, change the name by double clicking here, and then we write white. Now let's add the rest of the color. So we click on Create Variable right here, and then we click on Color, and now the new color will be added. We click on the value right here, and then we click on the color picker, and then we click on this color. Now we go back to the Properties panel right here, and then we change the name. Now we add the rest of the colors following the same process. Now we have all the colors set as variables. Now we can reorder them by clicking and dragging. And then we can create groups by selecting both colors. We just have to press and maintain Shift and then select the other color, all right? And then we right click and then click on New Group with Selection. Now we have the group here. We double click and then we can rename it. For example, we can call these neutrals. And then we click on all variables right here. And then we select all these other colors. We right click and then we create a new group. And then we call this group main colors. All right, so now we have all the colors organized in two groups, neutrals and main colors. And now to apply the colors to elements is very easy. We select the element and then in the Properties panel, where it says Fill, we click on these four dots and then we click on the color. You can also apply the same color to multiple elements by selecting them. And then here in the Properties panel, you click on the icon as well, and then you click on the desired color. Now I will show you how to use number variables. And number variables can be used for spacing, size, radius, and width and height. I will show you how to set and organize spacing using the 8-point grid system. All right, so to set it, we click here in the Properties panel, Local Variables. And then let's first rename this collection, the colors collection. And then we create a new collection. We can name this collection Spacing. Now let's click on Create Variable, then Number, and then we can name this variable Extra Small, and then we give it a value of 8. All right, so here we have all these spacing variables. And this is a very simple naming convention, but you can name them something like XS, S, M, ML, L, and so on. And you can also add larger spacing variables if you need to. All right, so let's apply these spacing variables. So let's say we want to add a consistent spacing for these 3 cards. So let's select all these cards. And then here in the Properties panel, we can see how the padding is set to 31 pixels. And this is not a multiple of 8. So we click here and then we click on medium, which is 32 pixels. And now, as we can see, the padding is set to 32 pixels. And then we can do the same thing with the space between items. All right, apply variable, and then we can click on medium, or even we can set the medium large. And then we do the same thing with the vertical padding. And now, as we can see, everything is set correctly. Now I will show you how string variables work, and strings are basically words. Let's go to the properties panel, and then we click here again, and then we create a new collection. We call this collection strings, and then we create a string variable. Now let's rename this string, and then we add this value. We create another string variable, and then we rename it to menu item 2. And then we set the value, services, and then we create a third one for menu item 3, and then we add contact as the value. Now we select menu item 1, and then here in the properties panel where it says text, we click on this icon, and then we apply the variable, this one. Now we do the same thing with menu item 2. And then the same thing with menu item 3. And the same thing with the menu items in the footer. We select this variable, and then now this. We select this variable, and now here we also apply this variable. And now we have all the variables applied. And now if we open the variables panel, and then we change this value to portfolio, for example, we can see how it changes everywhere. Now I will show you how to create light mode and dark mode components using variables. So here we have the light mode component, and then here we have the dark mode component. Instead of using two components, one for each mode, we can use a single component and then toggle between light mode and dark mode. All right, so let's create a new variable collection, and then we can name it theme. Now we create a new color variable, and then we name this variable background. Now let's create a new mode by clicking here, and then we name this mode light, and then this one dark. Now let's change this color with the color picker, and then this background. I've created all the rest of the color variables right here, as you can see, for the light mode and then for the dark mode. All right, and now what we have to do is apply those color variables to this component. So let's select this component, and then in the properties panel we change this, we click, and then we click on the variable, which in this case right here where it says theme is the background. We should do the same thing with the shape, and then the text, and then the bottom background, and then the button text. Oh, and we can't forget the stroke as well. So let's set it. And now let's select the component. And then here in the properties panel, right next to appearance, we'll see this icon, right? So we click, and now we can choose between light mode and then dark mode, right? Now I will show you how to use number variables to set sizes. Let's say we want to make this card wider. We can do it by adding the new size here, or we can do it more systematically with variables. So as always, we set a variable by clicking here, and then we create a new collection. We can name this collection sizes. Now let's create a collection. We name the collection cards, and then we create a number variable. Now we name this width, we right click, we duplicate it, and then this one height. The value for this will be 320, and then this one 360. Now let's group them, and then we name this group product card. Now let's apply the variables. So we select this frame, and then here in the properties panel we click here, and then apply variable, and then we click on width. We can see the change applied, and then we do the same thing with the height. All right, so now we have the width and the height variables applied. All right, now let's explore Boolean variables. And Boolean basically means yes or no, true or false. So for example, do we want these triangles to appear? Yes or no, right? Boolean variables in Figma are typically used in prototypes and design systems to control the visibility, state, or behavior of components. They help create dynamic interactive designs by toggling specific properties on or off. So let's create a Boolean variable by clicking here, as always, and then we create a collection. We call this collection shapes, and then we click on create variable right here, and we click on Boolean. Now we change the name to triangle, for example. Then we change the value to true by clicking here. Now let's apply the Boolean variable to these two triangles, right? So we select the two triangles. And then here in the properties panel where it says appearance, we right click on this eye icon, right? And then you will see the variable right here. Then click. Now let's open the variables panel. And now when we toggle these on and off, we can see how the triangles appear and disappear. So this is a Boolean variable. All right, now let's talk about aliasing. Aliasing variables in Figma means reusing or linking one variable to another instead of creating duplicates. So this is how it works. Let's say we have this box of crayons, right? And then we want to color multiple elements, right, with this color. So instead of using 3 crayons, for example, one for each of these elements, we would use a single crayon, all right, to color these 3 elements. In design systems, we call these main colors primitive variables, and they are the base values. The colors linked to these primitives, like the ones used for buttons, titles, or backgrounds, are called semantic variables. These semantic variables give the primitives a specific role or purpose in the design. All right, I will show you how it works. So here we have the colors we said earlier. All right. And these colors will be our primitive colors. And I've created a new collection named brand colors. And these colors will be our semantic colors. So the semantic colors represent the intention of use, and then the primitive colors represent the value. All right. So here in our primitives, we have this royal blue, all right, and we have the value. And then if we go to the semantic colors, which are the colors we'll actually use in the design, we can see the intention of use, all right? This one is going to be used as a primary color, this one as a secondary color, this one for the buttons, and then for the background, and then for the text. And now, instead of using this color as a secondary color, let's say we want to use the royal blue we said in the primitives. So instead of changing the color here, we right click and then we create an alias, right? And now we scroll down until we see the primitive color we want, this one in this case, and then we click. And now they are linked. Now I've also linked this primary color to the primitive, okay? Now let's apply the semantic colors to these crayons. So in the properties panel, we click here, and then libraries, and then primary. And then we do the same thing with the blue crayon. Now we have these crayons linked to the semantics and therefore to the primitives. Now I've added a new element, all right? And these two elements, the crayon and this arrow, are linked to the same semantic variable. And now let's say instead of using royal blue, we want to use cinnamon. All elements linked to that semantic variable will change. And now let's say that instead of using cinnamon, you want to change the color of the primitive variable because you want all the elements linked to that primitive variable to change their color to sunflower yellow, for example. We don't have to change anything in the semantic variable, all right? We go to the primitive, and then here we can change the color to sunflower yellow. And then when we go back to the semantic, we can see how it's updated right here. And also we can see the elements updated with this new color. Don't worry if this is still a little bit confusing, because in the next lesson, you will see how aliasing variables work in practice, since we'll create a small design system from scratch. In this lesson, you've learned what Figma variables and modes are, the different types of variables, how to create variables and modes, and also what aliasing is and how to create aliases. Now it's time to move to the next lesson. In this lesson, we are diving into design systems, the backbone of consistency, efficiency, and scalability in modern design workflows. You will learn how to create a simple design system using Brad Frost's Atomic Design Framework, which breaks everything down into clear, reusable parts: atoms, molecules, and organisms. We'll start by building foundational elements like colors, typography, and spacing, known as atoms. Then you will learn how to combine those atoms into components known as molecules, things like buttons, for example. And finally, we'll organize molecules into larger, more functional components called organisms, such as cards or navigation bars. Let's get started. So what is a design system? A design system is a collection of reusable components, guidelines, and design assets that help teams create consistent and scalable designs efficiently. It acts as a single source of truth for a product's design and development. So inside of a design system, we have different elements, and based on the atomic design system, we have atoms, all right, which are foundational items like colors, typography, spacing, and icons, for example. And then we have molecules, which are basically groups of atoms, right? And this could be buttons or input fields, for example. And then we have organisms, which are basically groups of molecules. And this could be cards or, navigation bars or larger components. All right, so I just created this page in light mode and also dark mode, and we'll basically create a very simple design system for it. Okay, so the first thing that I did was to design this freely, okay? I wasn't constrained by a system. So I recommend you to start by designing freely without a system to let your creativity flow and explore possibilities. And then once you have a foundational idea, refine it and build a design system around it. Because this approach balances freedom and structure, ensuring your designs are both creative and consistent. All right, so now we'll start with the atoms, which are the design tokens. And the first one will be the colors. We'll now create the color styles, and we'll be using both color styles and variables because in Figma it's a good idea to have both, since they work together to make your design system more powerful and easy to use. Basically, color styles are like ready-made labels for your colors that you can quickly apply to designs, keeping everything consistent. And as you already know, variables, on the other hand, are more dynamic and let you do things like switch between light and dark themes. And we can also link color styles to variables, and that's very useful because by doing that, we can easily pick from a set of colors and then use variables to handle more advanced changes like theme updates. Okay, so let's create a frame which will contain our colors. So let's press F on our keyboard, and then let's draw a frame, something like this for now. We can now rename the frame to colors. Now let's select this frame, and then in the properties panel right here where it says selection colors, we'll see all the colors we used. And we'll not use pure black, so this one we can change it to this color, and then it's going to unify with the other one we had below, right? And now we'll create color styles for each of these. And to create the color style, we basically click on the color right here, and then we click this plus sign, and then we click on style, and then here we can add a name. This one will be black, all right? And then we click on create style. And now we have our style created. Now follow the same process to complete all the other color styles like I did, all right? Now let's create some shapes that will contain our colors. So here we select this frame, all right? And then we press F on our keyboard. And then we draw a small frame, something like this for now. Then we select the frame. Here in the properties panel, we click on fill, and then let's apply a color style, black. Now while we have this shape selected, we go to the properties panel again, we click on the color style, and then we click here, edit style, and then we copy the color code. Now we go back to the shape, we press T on our keyboard, we click, and then we paste the code. Like this. We place it right here for now. Let's select the color code. Then we change the color to black. And then we move it here. Now let's make a copy of this text, and then we write the color name. Now let's organize it, so we press and maintain Shift, we select the color code, and then we press Shift A to activate auto layout, and then while we have this selected, we select the shape, while we press and maintain Shift, and then we activate auto layout. Now let's select the color name, and then we press the up arrow on our keyboard. Now let's select this frame, and then in the properties panel, we align it to the left. Now we select this nested frame, and then we change the spacing to 8 pixels. Now let's style this frame a little bit, so we select it, and then in the properties panel, we set the corner radius to 6. It's just like a small detail. It's basically the same corner radius we are using in the design. Now we select this frame, and then we press Alt on our keyboard, and then we drag to make a copy. All right, now we select this frame, and then in the properties panel, we select the next color, which is this one. Now we copy the color code. So right here, we copy the code, and then we paste it here. All right, so if this happens, we select this frame, all right, and then we set it to fill container. Let's do the same thing here. And then let's change the name of the color. All right, so here we have our colors, and now we'll organize them. Normally, we would have many different categories for our colors, like primary, secondary, neutral, shades, and so on. But for this example, we want to keep it simple, and we'll only categorize them in 2 groups, primary and secondary. The title on this one is too long, and I don't want it to occupy 3 lines, so I will select all the text, and then in the properties panel, I will change the text size to 18. Now let's organize them. All right, so here we have our primary colors, and then here we have our secondary colors. Now we have to add an extra color, and it's basically this dark graphite color that we are using here in the dark mode. So let's create the color style. Now let's make a copy of this color. All right. And then we select this frame. And then since I have auto layout activated here, I will go to the properties panel and then click on wrap. Now we select this frame. And then here in the properties panel, we apply the dark graphite color. And then we copy the color code. And we paste it here. We change the color name. And that's it. All right, so we have our colors. Now let's work on the next item, the typography. I've created this black page, so we have a little bit more of, text size variety. All right. And now let's create the text styles. So the first text style we'll create is the display text style. And this text style is basically used for prominent and, attention grabbing text like this, right? So let's select this text. Then here in the properties panel, right next to typography, we click on these 4 dots and then this plus sign. And here we add a name. In this case, display desktop. And if we click here on show more options, we can see all the settings. Let's change the line height to 120% and then create style. Now when we click on the canvas, we can see here in the properties panel the text style created. All right. Now let's apply the text style to this text as well. So we select it and then in the properties panel, we click these 4 dots right next to typography and then we click on the text style. Now let's create the H1 text style for the title. So we select this title and then in the properties panel, we follow the same process. %, and then create style. Now let's click on the canvas and we can see how we have the text style created. I will actually change the weight of the font. So here to regular. And then this one as well. I'm not going to apply the text styles and updates here because we'll basically use variables, all right, to toggle on and off light and dark mode. And we'll use this design as a reference only. All right, so I've added the rest of the text styles here. So if you are following along, feel free to create them. Now let's create a frame right here. Something like this. And then we press T on our keyboard and then we write display desktop H1 and then the rest of the text styles. All right, so now we have all the text styles here and we'll basically select them one by one, right? We select one and then we go to the properties panel and we set the correct text style. Now let's move this here a little bit and then let's select this. Move it down, then select them all, and then activate auto layout. Then select this frame, and then activate auto layout as well. Now let's resize it like this. Then let's set a 40 pixel padding. And then let's continue setting the text styles. All right, so I've set the text styles here, and now we have to reorder them because this one is actually smaller than these two, and then this one is the smallest. So this one should stay here. As you can see here, we are using 2 different text styles, all right, that share the same size. And you might be wondering why not use only one, okay? So even if these 2 text styles have the same size, they are used for different purposes. And in the future, we might want to change one of them, all right? And we don't want that change to affect the other one. So that's why we separate them. Let's change the name of this frame. And now we have the colors and then we have the typography. The next thing is spacing. All right, so here we have the spacing we'll use. And since you have access to this Figma file, feel free to replicate it. All right, now it's time to create the grid. Let's select this frame. And we can see the grid we are using right here. So we click, and then we can see here the information. And now we will add this grid to our design system. All right, so here we have the desktop grid. Okay, here is the information. And this is very easy to replicate, so feel free to do it. And make sure you create a style for this grid. All right, so now it's time to add the logo to our design system. And this is basically a, like a placeholder logo, all right, that I just created for this example. And this is currently text, so we'll select it and then right click and then copy it as SVG, all right? And now let's paste it somewhere around here. And now, since this logo is basically an SVG item, we can resize it. So we press Shift to maintain the aspect ratio, and then we resize it. Let's make it smaller, something like this for now. All right, so here we have the logo, the dark mode logo and then the light mode logo. Here we have the size, and then here we have the color and then the breakpoint. Now let's copy this logo, all right, and then let's paste it here inside of the header. We move it here, we remove this logo. Okay, great. So I noticed that this button is not correctly set because it doesn't have auto layout, but no worries because we'll fix it right now. Okay, the next thing we'll add to our design system is the corner radius. All right, so here we have the corner radius. And usually when designing a website, we would have different corner radius values depending on the size of the element. Because let's say we apply this corner radius to a smaller element, like something like this. As we can see, all right, the corner radius is too pronounced, okay? And maybe we would add a corner radius of 2 pixels, all right? But for the sake of this, example, I will just use one value, which is 6. All right, so now let's add the last item of this design system, which are the icons. And for this example, I will only use one icon because that's enough for you to understand how it works. All right, so here we have the icon, and this is an SVG image. So when I basically resize it, we can see how it stays crisp, all right? So make sure that every time you import an icon, it's in SVG format. Okay, so now while I have this frame selected, I will activate auto layout. Then I will set the padding to 0. Now let's set the frame to hug, right? Now let's select the arrow, which is the vector that's inside of the frame, all right? This one. And then let's click here in the properties panel to maintain the aspect ratio. And then let's set the height to 32 pixels. Now we make a copy, right, of this icon. And then we select the arrow. And this arrow will have a height of 24 pixels. Okay, so I created 2 extra icons. And this one, the largest one, has a height of 32 pixels. Then this one, a height of 24 pixels. This one, 20 pixels. And then this one, 16 pixels. So here we have the icons, right? It's basically this single icon in different sizes. All right, so I've quickly created 2 more breakpoints, all right? The tablet breakpoint and then the mobile breakpoint. And I've also added the grids for the tablet breakpoint and then the mobile breakpoint, and as well as the typography, all right? And then the logo as well, all right? And we have all the items. If you are following along, make sure to replicate all these, okay? And here, I don't know if you noticed, but here I've added the margin right here, okay? That's why this is slightly different, okay? But the value is still the same. The next step is to create the individual components. And we'll basically create a component for the icon and then a component for the logo. Before we continue, I wanted to create the dark mode version of this, icon, and then the light mode version as well. It doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, we'll use variables, but I wanted to have this here as a reference. We'll use variants for the different sizes, and then we'll use variables for the different colors. So one for dark mode and then another one for light mode. And you might be wondering why not use variables for both? And that's because Figma has a limitation with the aspect ratio. So basically, when we create a variable for an icon and then we want to resize it, we have to set the width and then the height individually, all right? And that's not ideal. And I think that Figma is working to overcome this limitation, but for now, the best approach is to create variants for the different sizes and then variables to switch between colors. Okay, this is what I mean. So here we have this component, all right? And then here we have a variable, which is the icon height, okay? And each of these values represent a size. Now, if I go here in the properties panel, and then I apply the variable, and then try to switch to a different size, it doesn't automatically maintain the aspect ratio, okay? As we can see here, all right? And then if I switch to a smaller size, we can see how this is not ideal. The ideal thing would be to be able to maintain the aspect ratio automatically as we resize the icon with variables. But as I said, Figma is always, updating their software and adding new features. So check it out, because maybe by the time you are watching this video, they've already added that feature. Okay, so let's continue by creating the components. Let's create a new page for this. All right, we call this page components. Then we go back to the design system page. Now let's select the icon. Make sure you select this frame. All right. And then let's press and maintain Alt on our keyboard, and then let's create a duplicate. Now let's do the same thing with the logo. So make sure you select this frame, and then we press Alt on our keyboard, and then we create a duplicate. Let's move it here. Let's select both, then copy them. We go to the components page, and then we place them here. Now let's select the icon, and then we create a component, and then we do the same thing with the logo. We can rename them something like this. And then this one as well. And now we'll have the components here in the Assets tab, all right? The next thing we have to do is create the variants, all right, for this icon. So let's go back to the design system page, and then we select this frame, all right? And then we copy this as a PNG. We go back to the components page, and then we paste it here, all right? Let's move it. Let's resize it maybe. Swap. Okay. Now let's select the icon, and then let's move it up a little bit right here. And then we right click, and then we go to main component, and then we add a variant. Now let's resize this icon, and you have to make sure that the vector has these activated, all right, to maintain the aspect ratio, okay? And then the container should be set to hug, because when we resize the vector, all right, we want the this frame to also resize automatically. So now let's select the vector, and then let's change the height to 24 pixels. Now let's rename this variant, and when we double click, we can see how it says property 1 equals variant 2, all right? So we have to change only this part for now, okay? When it says property 1, we'll change it later to size. Now, if we create an instance of this component, let's do it right now. So we press Alt and then we click and drag, and this is the instance, right? And then here in the properties panel, we can switch between variants. Okay, as you can see, perfect. Let's remove this for now. And then now let's create all the other sizes. So let's move this up a little bit. Then let's resize it. We select the main component and then we make a duplicate. Now let's select the vector. And then we set the size to 20 pixels, all right, the height. And here we have it. Now this layer, all right, this frame has a padding right here. And to fix it, we just have to set the height to hug. Now let's change the name. We do the same thing. We select this part. That's it. Now let's create the last one. So you can basically press Alt and then drag to create a duplicate, or you can click this plus sign. Let's move it here. As we can see, this frame is already set to hug, all right? So we have to select the vector and then resize it to 16 pixels. That's it. Let's now rename this variant. And let's rename the main component as well. Now let's align this perfectly by activating auto layout on this frame. And then let's set the spacing between items to 32 pixels. And now let's do exactly the same thing with the logo. Whoops, I just noticed that I was naming the icon logo. So let's change this. All right, so now it makes sense. Okay, and I've also noticed that this icon right here has the width set to fill and it has to be set to hug. Okay, great. Now let's create all the variants for the logo following the same process. So let's go to the design system page and then we select this frame. We right click, then copy as PNG. We go back to the components page and then we paste it here. Let's move it, then resize it, something like this. Now we select the logo, then we make sure that this layer, right, the main container, has the width set to hug and then the height set to hug as well. We can already rename this to logo 32 pixels. And I'm using an M dash, but you can use a hyphen if you want, or a space, whatever you want. Now let's select this component and then let's click this plus sign to add a variant. Let's resize this. We move the variant here. We make sure that it's set to hug. Okay. And then we select the vector and we resize the height to 24 pixels. Now let's change the name. And then let's create the last variant. We do the same thing. We select the vector. And then here we change these to 20 pixels this time. And then we change the name. Now let's select this frame. Okay. And then we activate auto layout. And we set this spacing to 32 pixels. Now let's duplicate the default variant. And then let's see if it works. Right here. We change. All right, it works perfectly. Let's remove this. And then this. And now we have our two first components. Let's go back to the design system page. We can remove this already. And now it's time to create our molecules. And the first molecule we'll create is a button, specifically this button, okay? And obviously the text will be centered. All right, I'll rearrange the atoms here, okay? And then we will place the molecules right here. And no worries, because we will basically reorganize these later on, so it looks nice and clean. All right, so let's select this button. And then let's duplicate it right here. Now let's select it, and then let's activate auto layout. Now let's select this button. And then here in the properties panel, we can see that it has a height of 64 pixels. So we'll apply that height to this button. 64. And then we'll add a padding on each side of 24 pixels. And then a padding to the top and the bottom of 16 pixels. So this button is our first molecule. Now I've added the button here in the tablet breakpoint, and it's slightly smaller, okay? And this will be a variant. Now let's turn this button into a component. And then let's add a variant. Since we want the properties of this button applied to this button, we can just select this button, right? And then we right click, and then copy, paste as, and then we click on copy properties, all right? And now we select this variant, and then we right click, and then copy, paste as, and then we paste properties, okay? Now we have to make sure that the text inside of this button is set to button text tablet, okay, instead of desktop. Now let's change the name of the component. So we can name it something like simple button. All right, so now let's rename the variants. And this one will be basically used for desktop, and then this one for tablet. That's why we'll call this one desktop and then this one tablet, because this works in this context. If we wanted to basically use this button in different sizes throughout the site, regardless of the device, we would call this one large and then this one small, right? And obviously I would create another one for mobile, because here in the real world, when we click on this button, we should also show this CTA, right? When the mobile menu appears. So let's create another variant for mobile. So we click here, and then we click this plus sign to add a variant, and then we select the text, all right? And then here in the properties panel, we change it to the button text mobile, okay? For this button, all right, we'll change the height to 56 pixels, all right? Now let's change the name. So this one, the default one, we'll call it simple button desktop. And then let's reorder it. We place it here. And then this one, which is the one for tablet, we move it here. Then we change the name. And then we do the same thing with the mobile one. Now let's create an instance by duplicating this button right here. And let's see if it works. So we select the button, and then here we change the property. All right, and as we can see, it works. Now we can remove this instance, and I will actually change the padding, on the sides for this button, okay? So it's a little bit more consistent with the other one. So we can change it to 16 pixels, and it looks better now. Now let's create the different states for this button. And we can create a hover state, and we can also create a click state. Let's start with the hover state. So let's resize this. Now let's select these three buttons, and then let's change the background color to this. All right, so now before we continue with the hover state, let's select these three buttons, right? And then here in the properties panel, where it says property 1, we change this to size, all right? Because this property will represent the size. And as you can see, it will also update here, all right? So instead of property 1, it says size. Now let's select these three buttons, okay? And then here in the properties panel, we select the last variant. So this one, variant 6, and then we move it up. Now we have this organize, and then we know that variant 4 is this one. So it's basically the desktop button. So here we can copy this name. Actually, we can copy everything and then paste it here. We add a comma and then state equals hover. And now for this button, we have the size and then we have the state. Now let's select this button, all right, the desktop button. And then here in the properties panel, we have to basically add this to the name. State equals default, because this is the default button, right? And then we copy this. And then here we do the same thing. And then here we do the same thing. And now if we select these three buttons, we can see how we have the size property and then the state property. Now, if we duplicate this and create an instance, all right, we can see here how we can change the size, all right, and then we can change the state. Okay. We could also create an active state and also a click state. It's basically the same process, all right? For this example, we will only use these two states. So let's see this in action. Let's select this button and then let's paste it here. Then we remove this one. Now we select this button again. Then here in the properties panel, we click on prototype right here. Then we go back to the button and then we'll see this little circle right here. All right. We click on it, then hold and then drag to connect it to this variant. And now we change the trigger to while hovering, okay? And we have some more options, but we'll keep it like this for now. We close it. Now let's preview this page by selecting it. And then here, we click on this play button. And now when we hover over this button, we can see how it's working perfectly. Now we can close this. Now let's copy this component, or we can cut it by pressing Ctrl or Command X, and then we go to the components page, and let's paste it here. Now let's select this component, and then let's change the name of the property to size. The same thing here. Okay, this is already set. Now let's go back to the design system page. Now let's create the first organism, the header. So let's select the header and then we press Alt on our keyboard, then we drag to place it here. Now we can cut it by pressing Ctrl X and then we go to the components page and then we paste it here. Now let's convert it into a component. All right. Now let's add an instance of this logo here, okay? Because this logo right here is not an instance. So let's go to assets right here, and then we click here, and then we click and drag this logo right here. And now we can remove this one. So basically every change we make to this logo right here will reflect here as well. Let's change the color of this logo back to black. All right, so now let's create a variant. And this will be for the tablet. So let's change the name here. Header tablet. And then this one will be for the desktop. Now let's reorder these by moving these up. And then let's select the tablet header. And then let's change the width to 810 pixels, which is basically the default width of our tablet breakpoint. Now we can make all the necessary edits. So let's select the logo. And then we change the size to 24 pixels, which is the one we are using for our tablet breakpoint. Now we can select this menu item and then remove it. And then change this one to menu. And then select this button. And change the size to tablet. Now we create another variant. And this will be the mobile variant. So we basically change the size, the width, right, of this header to 390 pixels, which is basically the size we are using for the mobile breakpoint. Now we select the button and then we remove it because we have no button here. Now we select the menu text and then in the properties panel we change the text style to the tablet version, right, this one. And then we select the logo and then we change the size to 20 pixels. Now let's select the mobile variant and then let's change the name here. Header mobile. Let's move the tablet one up. Now let's select the component and then let's change the property name to size. Now let's make a copy of this variant, all right, the desktop variant. And while it's selected here in the properties panel, we change the size to see if everything works correctly. Perfect. Now we can remove this instance. Now let's go back to the design system page. And this will be basically the design page, okay? So we will change the name later. But for now, since we have this right here, okay, we can keep this name for now. But this will be in a separate page. All right, let's place the header right here. So let's go to the assets library right here. And then we see the header. And then we drag it right here, okay? And now we can remove this header. So we have the component now. Now we go back to the assets library right here, and then we drag the header again. And this time we place it inside of the tablet breakpoint. The next thing we have to do is go here in the properties panel where it says size and then change this to header tablet, right? Now here we have it. And then while we have it selected, we go to the properties panel and then we set the width to fill container. Now I can see here an oversight. And I don't know if you noticed, but this text is larger than this one, all right? And it should be the same. So let's right click and then click on go to main component. Let's now select the text and then let's set the correct text style. Now let's return to the instance by clicking here. This is very nice. And then let's remove this header and keep the component. And now let's do the same thing in the mobile breakpoint. We drag it here and then we change the size. We set it to fill container and then we remove this one. All right, so I did the same thing with the footer, okay? So we have this component. Let's go to the component so I can show you. All right, so it's basically the same process. So if you are following along, make sure to create it, okay? Now let's create our second organism, which is basically this card, all right? But first, I want to style this button differently. So let's select it. And then I will change the padding on the sides to 16 pixels. And then set an automatic space between items. And now this button looks much better. Now let's select this card, then we press Alt on our keyboard and then we drag this here and then we create a component. Then we cut it by pressing Ctrl or Command X. And then we go to the components page and we paste it right here. Now I will add some default text in here. So right here I will add these. And then I will change this to title, and then this to something like this. And now let's create a variant. Select it, and then here I will resize this. And this will be our tablet variant. Now we have to make sure that this text is set to desktop. Right now it's set to tablet, so let's change it. And then let's verify this. This one is set to desktop, so it's good. And then this one is also set to desktop. Now let's select this text to confirm that it's set to tablet. Perfect. Now let's select the title, and then let's change it to tablet. Same thing with this button text. Now let's create a new variant, and this will be for the mobile breakpoint. Let's go back to this page, and then let's select this card. We right click, and then we copy the properties. Then we go back to the components page, and now we paste the properties. Now we can change the size of the text. We change it to the mobile breakpoint, and then the title as well, and the button as well. So this button right here is a molecule, right? And then this card is an organism. What we'll do now is basically create a variant of this component, and it will be styled like this button. And then we'll place that molecule here. Let's resize this. All right, now let's move this here. And then let's resize this as well. And now let's create a variant. Let's change the background color to white. Let's add a stroke, set to black. We set the stroke to 2 pixels. And then we select the text that's inside. And then we change it to black. Now let's choose one of these arrows. So let's select this one, for example, and then we press and maintain Alt on our keyboard. Then we drag this right here. And as we can see, this is too large. So let's select a different size. So we select the arrow, and then here in the properties panel, we can choose a different size, like 24 pixels, for example. It's still too large. So let's choose 20 pixels. This looks fine. Now let's select the button, and then here in the properties panel, we double click here to set the space between to automatic. All right, so now let's change the name of this variant. So instead of simple button, we'll call it alternative. Now let's move this up, and then let's create another variant. We select the text, and then we change these to button text tablet. And then we do the same thing again. And this time we change the text to mobile. And then for the mobile variant, we'll also change the arrow size, okay? So basically we change it to 16 pixels. Now let's change the names. So this one will be tablet. And then this one will be mobile. All right, so this setup works, but it's not ideal. And I will show you why right now. Let's create an instance. And then here in the properties panel, we can see that we can change the size, but then we have this mixed up, right? Because we have the size and then we have the type. So basically we have to create an extra property that says type, and then we can choose between a basic button and then an alternative button. So let's do it. Let's remove this instance, and then let's change the name of these three variants. So let's select them, and then here in the properties panel, we know that we have to change the name of these three. Okay, so let's click, and then this, we change it back to simple. Then we can copy this, and then here as well, and then here as well. Now let's select all these instances, right? The basic ones, okay? And then while we have them selected here in the properties panel, we right click, and then we click on rename. You can also press Ctrl or Command R on your keyboard, and then here we'll see this window pop up. We click on current name because we want to keep the current name. And then we add a comma, and then type equals basic. And then we click on rename. And now we have this new property created. And now we select these three variants, and then we press Ctrl or Command R on our keyboard, and we'll see this window again. Then we click on current name, then we add a comma, and then type equals, and this time we will write alternative, right? And then we click on rename. And now if we create an instance of this button, right? And then here we can see in the properties panel that we can switch between the size, okay? And then between basic and alternative now. All right, and then we can change the size as well. Amazing. Now we just have to create a hover state for these variants. You might be thinking, okay, so why this arrow right here is so close to the text, and here is more separated, and then here is more separated. And this doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, these buttons will be set to field container in the design, right? So the width doesn't really matter. If you want, you can do this, right? If you prefer, it doesn't matter. And also the space between items is set to auto. All right, so let's proceed to create the hover state. So let's resize this, and then let's select these three variants, and then we duplicate them. Now let's select these three variants, and then let's change the background color to this color. Now while we have these three variants selected, we change the state to hover. And then let's see what happens if we change the state of this instance. Excellent. And this is the magic of variants. We can basically change the size of the button, the state of the button, all right, and then the type of the button from the properties panel. And I know that for some beginners, this might seem a little bit complex, but if you get it right, you will save a lot of time and your design will be cleaner. And whenever you have a question or feel stuck, make sure you ask in the community. I am very active there, and there are other very advanced designers in there as well. So don't be shy and ask questions. All right, so let's continue. Let's remove this instance, and then let's scroll down until we see the cards. Now let's go to the assets library, and then let's click on this button, and then the size should be desktop, then the state default, and then the type alternative. And then we click on insert instance. Now we have the instance here. Now while we have it selected, we press Ctrl or Command X on our keyboard, and then we select this nested frame, and then we paste it here. Now we have the instance here, and we can remove this button. Now we select the instance, and then here in the properties panel, we set the width to field container. Now while we have this button selected, we press Ctrl or Command C, and then we select this nested frame here in the tablet breakpoint, and then we paste it here. Now here we have the instance, and we have to remove this button right here. Now we select the instance, right? And then in the properties panel, we set the width to field container. And now this time when we have this instance selected, we change the size to tablet, right? And then we do the same thing. We copy this instance, and then we select this nested frame, and then we paste it here. We remove this button, and then we select the instance, and we make sure it's set to field container. Now we change the size to mobile, and that's it. All right, so now let's change the names of these variables. So this one is the desktop one. We can already change the property here as well. And instead of size, we can call it device. So device equals card desktop. And then we copy this. And this one, the second one, is the tablet one. So we paste this and then tablet. And finally, this one is the mobile one. Now let's go back to this page. And then let's place the instances of the card component here. Here in the assets library, we click on this component, and then we insert this instance. Now, while we have this instance selected, we press Ctrl or Command X on our keyboard to cut it. And then we select this nested frame, all right, the one containing the 3 cards, and then we paste it here. Now with our keyboard, let's move it to the left, all right here. And then let's select this card, and then let's move it out. Let's make sure that this text is set to desktop. Now we copy it, and then we paste it here. Then we select this title, we copy it, and then we paste it here. Now, following the same process, let's add the other 2 instances. All right, so now we have the instances here, and we can remove these cards. Now let's do the same thing with the other 2 breakpoints. All right, so now we have all the instances placed. Now here, as you can see, I've added the, I've created these components, okay? And then I've placed these instances here. We can see here, if we go to the components page, so here is the article card and then the page title. And now what I want to do is basically hide this icon right here in this button. And we can do this in multiple ways. We could create a new button variant, but there is a much cleaner and organized way to do it. And that's by applying a Boolean variable. So let's do that. Let's go to the components page. And then let's scroll until we see the buttons. Now we click on the canvas. And then here, where it says local variables, we click. Now we'll see this window pop up. We click on create variable, and then we create a Boolean variable. Now we can rename this collection to buttons. And then we change the name of the variable to icon visibility. Now we create a new mode by clicking on this plus sign, all right? And we will rename this mode show, and then this one hide. Now we click here, and then we close this window. Now we have to link this icon to the variable. So let's select this icon. And then here in the properties panel right next to appearance, we'll see this icon right here. Then we click, and then we click on icon visibility. Now let's select the icon in this variant, all right? And then we press and maintain Shift Alt on our keyboard. Then we select this one, and then this one, and then this one, and this one. And we do the same thing here in the properties panel. We click here, and then icon visibility. All right, so there is an issue that I noticed, and if we go to this page, and then we select this frame, all right, this one, and then we click on this play button. When we hover over this button, we can see how it's not working as it's supposed to. And this is very easy to fix. So let's close this, and then let's go back to the components page. And now when we select this button, and then here in the properties panel, we click on prototype, we can see how this button is still linked to this variant, okay? To remove this connection, we just have to click on this arrow, all right? And then we press delete on our keyboard. And now we hover over this button, and then we click on this plus sign, and then we maintain the mouse button pressed, and then we drag. And now we can release the mouse button. And then we change the trigger to while hovering. Now we can close this, and let's see if it's working. Let's go to this page. And then while we have this frame selected, we click on this play button again. And we can see how it's not working. And that's because we have to basically remove this connection. And now it's going to work. Perfect. As you can see, instead of basically removing or editing mistakes, I fix them as I advance, because this is how it works in the real world. As I always say, oversights are very normal, all right? Because there are so many moving pieces and mistakes are bound to happen. But what's important is your awareness and the problem solving skills. All right, so let's continue. Now we can close this. All right, so now let's select this variant, and then we press and maintain shift. We select this one, and then this one, and then this one. And then we go here in the properties panel, and then we click on the prototype tab. And now we press and maintain shift, and then we select this connection, and then this one, and this one, and this one. And then we press the delete key on our keyboard. And since in this design, this button and then this button will be used in tablet and mobile, we don't need a hover state because it doesn't make sense. So no need to connect them, all right? So you might be wondering why we created then the hover states for these buttons, right? If we are not going to activate the hover state, since they are for, tablet and mobile. And that's because we are basically thinking about the future, right? Because maybe we create a page and we want a button that's smaller than this, and we can basically repurpose these buttons and then use them for desktop as well. In that case, what we would do, we would name them small, medium, and large, all right? Okay, so now let's select this variable, and then in the properties panel, we click on this icon right here, and then buttons and show. Okay, we click on show, and now we'll see this little drop down menu, and we can hide and show the icon. All right, now we select this one, and then we press and maintain shift. We select this one, and then here in the properties panel, we do the same thing. We click here and then show. This little drop down menu will appear, and now we can basically do the same thing, hide and show. Now let's scroll down, and then we select this button, and now here in the properties panel we hide the icon. And now we can see this update applied here. Now let's organize our file a little bit. So let's select all these frames, all right? And then we press Ctrl or Command X on our keyboard, and then we create a new page, and then we'll call this page design. And now let's paste it here. Now let's go back to this page, and then here I will basically organize this so it looks beautiful and clean. All right, so now we have this organized and clean, and this is the logo, and then here we have the icons, the spacing, the grids, the typography, all right, and then the colors and the corner radius. So these are the items. Here we have the design, very simple. And then here we have the components. All right, everything very organized and clean. And then now it's time to work on the variables. Let's start with the colors, but first I will change the names because this is more accurate if we call these ones neutrals and these ones main colors. And this will be our primitives. All right, let's create the color variables. So we click here, and then we create a new collection, and then we name these collection colors. Now let's create a color variable, and then we call this color white. Then we create another color variable, and then this one will be black. Now we click here, and then we click on the color picker, and then we choose this one. Now let's select these two colors, and then let's create a group. And now we name this group neutrals. Now let's click right here on all variables, and then let's follow the same process to add all these colors. All right, so now we have all the colors. Then we select all of them, and then we create a new group, and then we call this group main colors. Now we will link the color styles to the variables, all right? For example, this color black, we click here and then libraries, and then we link it to the black color variable. And now we can see here how it's now linked. Next, we follow the same process with the other colors. While linking the styles, I noticed that we are missing one color variable, all right, this one. So let's create it. Let's first quickly create the color card. So we select this, and then we make a duplicate, and then we call this one cinnamon, and then we change the fill here in the properties panel, and then we check the code, copy it, and then we paste it here. Now let's create the color variable. We change the name to cinnamon, and then we select the color with the color picker. And that's it. Now let's link the style to the variable. I will move this color card here. Okay, so we have our primitives here, and then we have the color styles linked to the primitive colors. All right, now it's time to create the aliases. Let's close this, and then we go to the components page. And now we'll create some pretty detailed aliases. Okay, so let's create a variable collection. And then we name this collection semantics. And now we create a variable, a color variable, and then we name this variable logo. Now let's create an alias. So we right click here, and then we click on create alias. And then remember that these are our primitive colors, all right? And then we click on black, right? And this will be the default color for our logo. And then we'll have the logo in dark mode and also in light mode. Now let's assign this variable to the logo. So let's go to the components page. We can close this now. Now we press and maintain control, and then we click on the logo. And then while we have control pressed, we press shift, and then we click on this one and then this one as well. Make sure you are selecting the the vectors, all right? Now here in the properties panel where it says fill, we click on this black color, and then instead of being linked to the color style, it has to be linked to the semantic color, all right? So this one. Now we click, and that's it. Let me explain again how this works so you better understand it if you have any doubt. So here we have the primitive colors, all right? And we can even change the name of this collection to primitive so it's more clear. Primitives, all right? So these are the primitives. These are the main colors we are using. And we could be using different shades for each color, all right? So multiple shades, for example, like a lighter clementine, all right? A darker cinnamon, all right? Many shades. And then here in the, semantics, we have variables that are more descriptive. So we have the logo, we'll also create the primary button and then the alternative buttons and so on, right? And then let's say that later on in the future, we want to change the shade of the logo or the button or whatever, instead of creating a specific color style, right? Because if not, like imagine we have multiple items and then each item has the same color and then we create a color style for each. We would have like a ton of color styles sharing the same color, and then that would make the design system very messy. So for example, for the logo, if we wanted to change the shade, right, or even the color, we only have to click here, right, and then change it right here, and that's it. And it would update throughout the entire design. Let me make a little demonstration. So here we have the logo, right? And let's say we want to change this logo to Clementine, all right? We can just go here and then change the color, right? And now we can see the change apply throughout the entire site. Okay. Let's change this back to black. If you are still confused about how this works, don't worry because I will give you another example. So keep watching. All right, now let's go back to the components page. And then now we'll create the semantic colors for the buttons. All right, so here we have all the variables for the buttons. So if you are following along, make sure to create them, all right? And now we'll select all of them. So we press and maintain Shift, and then we click this one to select all of these, and then we group them, right? And then we name this new group buttons. We can also create a group for the logo, even if it's just one variable, for better organization. All right. Okay, so now let's apply the variables. So here we select this button, right? And then we press and maintain Control Shift, and then we select this one and then this one. And then here in the properties panel where it says fill, we change it to this one, primary background default, right? And then now here in the properties panel, we can already see that this is the text, okay? So let's also apply the variable, which is this one, okay? Perfect. Now let's do the same thing with the hover state. So we select them all right? And then in the properties panel, we do the same thing. This one, and then for the text, this one. And now we repeat the same process with this. Okay, so we select them. All right, and then here in the properties panel, we set it to this one. And then the text will be this. And then here we have a stroke, right? So we have to basically create a new variable, right? New color variable. And then we name it stroke, and then default, right? And then now we create an alias. And then we link it to the primitive black, right? Now let's duplicate it. And then this will be for the hover. And even though it's the same color, I will create it just in case we want to change it in the future. Now we select both and then we drag them here. And then now here in the properties panel, we change these to the default one, right? Now let's select these three variants. And then let's follow the same process. And now this for the text. Now it's time to create a variable for the icon, okay? All right, I've created the variables. Here they are. Now we press and maintain control. We click on the icon and then we press, while we have control pressed, right? Or command if you are on a Mac, we press shift, we maintain shift, and then we click on this icon and then we click on this icon. Make sure you have the vector selected, right? And then now here in the properties panel, we apply the variable, which is this one. And now we do the same thing with the icon that's in the hover state. We select them, and then we apply the variable, this one. All right, so now let's create a variable for this icon, okay? Which is basically the main component. All right, so let's create the variable. We can call it right arrow, and then we map this to the primitive black, okay? And now we create a group, and then we call this group icons. Now let's double click here inside of the component, and then here we apply the variable, this one. All right, so the beauty of these is that, let's say we want to change the color of these icons. Let's say we have these icons placed in different places throughout the entire design, and we want to change the colors of all the instances, right? We can basically just change it here. Okay, and then the ones that we have in the buttons remain intact because they have their own alias, right? And then let's say we want to change this color. We can do so here. All right. Even though this is too light, this color is obviously not ideal for this, but I just wanted to show you an example. And now this one remains intact. Let's change this back to black. All right, here is a little exercise. Create and set the variables for all these components and their variants. And as always, if you feel stuck, make sure you ask any questions you have in the community, all right? Go to webdesignerscollective.com. Here is a shortcut. So let's say we want to create a group for these cards, all right? In this case, this one, and then this one, right? We would create a new variable. And then here we write the name of the group first. So in this case, cards, and then slash, and then the name of a subgroup, for example, info cards, right? And then we press enter. And then now we have the group right here. And now we create a subgroup. So we right click, and then we click here, new group with selection. And then we change the name of the subgroup to info cards, all right? And then here we can add something like background, for example. And then we press enter. Now let's link this variable to the primitive color through an alias. And something that I forgot to mention is that you can create an alias by right-clicking like I did in the beginning, or you can just do this, right? It's basically the same thing. Here, I don't know why Figma is adding this extra space here between info and card, because I didn't add the extra space, right? So, but it doesn't really matter, right? It appears correctly here. Here, I also noticed that after giving you the example, I didn't change the, the color of the icon that's inside of the button back to black. But no problem, because I will do it right now. Right here. Perfect. Okay, so let's continue with the cards. Here we can create another variable, and then we'll call this one article cards. And then we can place it here. And then this one will be the background. And now we connect it to the primitive, which is this one. Now let's select these two variables, and then we create a new group. And then this group will be called article cards. And then now let's move this group here. And now we have these two subgroups inside of the cards group. Okay, so here we have all the aliases, all right? And they are linked to the elements that form the components. And since you have access to this Figma file, make sure to create them if you are following along. All right, now let's create the corner radius variable. Here we have the corner radius and we know it's 6. So let's go here and then we click on local variables. And the corner radius variable will live inside of the primitives collection. So let's create the variable. And this time we choose the number variable. And then we call it corner radius. This will be the name of the group and then a slash. Corner radius default. And then we press enter. The value should be 6. And for the corner radius variable, we don't need a an alias because we are using this single variable throughout the entire design, okay? Now let's apply the corner radius variable to the buttons, all right? The header, the footer, the info cards, and then the article cards. This is how you apply the variable. Let's select the component, all right? And then we press enter. Now we have all the buttons selected. And then here in the properties panel, where it says appearance right here, okay? We click on this icon and then we click on the variable. Now you will see the value of the corner radius inside of this white square. And that means that now the corner radius is applied through a variable. Now follow the same process to apply the corner radius to all these different components. You can basically select them all since they all share the same corner radius. So you press Ctrl and then you hold and then you press Shift and then you click to select this one and then you select all these different components. All right. And then now in the properties panel, we apply the variable. Now it's time to create the spacing variables. So let's go back to the design system page. Now we have to create a new group inside of the primitives. Okay. And then this group will be called spacing. Okay, so let's create the group and then let's add the extra small space, which is basically 8 pixels. Let's click on create variable and then number. Now we add here the name of the group, which is spacing, then slash, and the name of the size. We press enter, and then here we add the value, which is 8 pixels. And now let's create variables for all these spaces. All right, so I just created all the sizes, okay? And the next thing we have to do is apply them in the design. Let's go to the design page. All right, so to set the spacing variables, we select the frame, all right, this frame in this case. And then as we can see, this one has a space of 120 pixels, right? If we go here in the properties panel, we'll see the space right here. Then we click on this arrow and then we click on apply variable. And then here we'll see the variable, right? And we don't have the 120, and that's on purpose because I wanted to change it to 80. Because in this case, I felt like 120 pixels was too large of a space for this particular area. All right, so now this space is basically linked to this variable. And then if we change the value of this variable, so let's write here on 300, for example, we can see how it's applied automatically, right? Let's change it back to 80. Pay attention because this is very important and very easy to overlook. Whenever you see an instance of a component like this, for example, and we want to apply the spacing between these, the title and then the button, we have to set it at a component level, okay? So basically you go to the component and then you set the space here, okay, the variable. Okay, now let's apply the different sizes throughout the entire design. And since you have access, you can just check the Figma file whenever you are stuck. All right, so I've applied the spacing variables throughout the design. Now I want to show you something so you can really understand why we set aliases. All right, so check this out. When I select this instance, right, and I select this space here between the title and the button, we can see how it's set through a variable to 32 pixels, right? And then the menu items have a space between items of 32 pixels, also set through the spacing variable, right? Now let's say we want to change the space between the title and this button to 72 pixels, right? So we change it here. And what happens is that this space changes, right? But then this space also changes, and we don't want that, right? We only want to change this space. And what we have to do, create a unique alias for this space. Let's change this back to 32, and then let's create the alias. We go to semantics, remember that. And then here inside of info cards, all right, inside of this subgroup, then let's create a number variable. And then we can call it something like title plus button spacing. Now let's create the alias. And then we select the desired space size, which is this one. Now let's go to the component of this instance. Now we select this, and then we press Ctrl and Shift on our keyboard, and then we maintain it. We select this, and then this as well. And then now here, we click on this arrow, and then apply variable. And now we apply this variable. All right, so this will be our default setting, okay? So basically, we will have this spacing right here connected to this variable, okay, through an alias. And if we want to modify, increase or decrease or whatever, all spacing that is currently 32 pixels, we leave this as it is right now, connected to this variable through an alias, okay? And then if we want to modify this spacing specifically, we add a number value here instead of an alias, okay? Let me show you. So this spacing right here is 32 pixels, right? And then this right here, all right, between menu items is also 32 pixels, as we can see here. And the space between these menu items and then the CTA is also 32 pixels. And if we scroll down, here we have a spacing of 32 pixels as well. So let's say now we want to update the spacing for all these elements to, let's say, to 40 pixels, right? We would go to the primitives right here, and we would probably change this one, right, to 48 pixels, and then this one to 40 pixels. And now all elements that have this spacing between them, like this, for example, will be set to 40 pixels, as we can see. And then here as well, 40 pixels. And then here as well, 40 pixels. Now let's set this back to 32 pixels and 40 pixels. Now this spacing is set to 32 pixels again. And let's say we want to change it to 72 pixels, for example. And we only want that change to be applied to this spacing. We would go to the semantics, and then we would unlink this alias, right here. And then we would modify these to 72 pixels. And that's it. As you can see, this is now 72 pixels. And then this is 32 pixels. And this is the magic of using aliases. Okay, so now for padding, okay, we can use the same values we are using for the spacing. Okay, so we use the same variables. All right, let's go to the primitives, and then we can use these values because it doesn't make sense to create a new collection since these overlap, right? So we can use the same primitives. And this is for this specific case. Maybe in a different scenario, we would create the padding collection separately. But in this case, we will organize it this way. Maybe we should change the name of the collection to spacing and padding, right? Okay, so you know how to apply this. We have this frame selected, and then we can see how we have 40 pixel, a 40 pixel padding on all sides. So we press and maintain control, and then we click here, and now we click on this icon, and then we set the desired padding, which is 40 pixels, okay? And that's it. And we should also apply the padding variables to our components. So we go to our components, and here we apply the padding variables to all our components and variants. For example, here in this variant, we have 32 pixels on both sides, and then 40 pixels at the top, and then 40 pixels at the bottom. So here in the properties panel, we click here, and then we set the variable, which is 32 pixels, and then this 40 pixels. All right, so if you are following along, make sure to apply the padding to all these variants. And also here on these frames, okay? All right, so I've applied all the paddings, all right, through variables. And I've also added a new primitive variable, which is this one. Let me show you. This one, all right? So every time you need a new variable, you can just add it here, okay? And this is the beauty of using variables. It keeps everything very organized, and it's still very flexible. All right, so now it's time to create a dark mode for this design. And we'll use variables for that, and variable modes, of course. Okay, let's open the local variables. And then here inside of the semantics collection, we basically create a new mode by clicking here, okay? And then we call this mode light, and then this one dark. Now let's create a color variable, and then we will name the group pages, and then the variable background. Here we have it. Now for the light mode, we'll set this to the white primitive. And then for the dark mode, we'll set it to the black primitive. Now let's test it. So let's close this for a moment. And then we select this frame. And then here in the properties panel, we detach this variable by clicking this icon, all right? And then we click here, and then we click on libraries. And now we search for pages, and then we click here. Now here, right next to appearance, we click on this icon, and then semantics, and then dark. It works, all right? This little drop-down menu will appear, and then here we can switch between dark and light, all right? Let's open the local variables again. And then basically now all we have to do is translate these colors. So for example, if the primary background of this button is black in the light mode, it's going to be white in the dark mode. So we change it here. This remains the same for now, and this will be black as well. All right, so here we have all the colors for the dark mode. So if you are following along, make sure to add them as well, okay? I've also created a new variable for the display text. All right, and then I applied that variable to this text and then this text as well. as we can see in the properties panel. Okay, so let's test it. If we select this frame, and then we go back to the properties panel right here, and then we click this icon, and then semantics, and then we choose dark. Boom. Perfect. Here is a very cool thing we can do. So let's select this frame, and then let's switch this back to auto. All right. Now let's click anywhere on the canvas. And then here in the properties panel, we'll see this icon right here. Then we click, and then we choose the dark mode. Brilliant. Now I will show you something very interesting. You can also use variables to translate your content. For example, you can basically use variables to translate this website from English to Arabic or any other language. And then you can quickly switch between languages. And I will show you how to do it right now. So let's say I'm making a design for a company that's in the United Arab Emirates, and they want to see the content of this design in Arabic. I would first copy this page as a PNG, all right? And now here in ChatGPT, I would paste the image of the page right here, and then I would write this prompt. Can you please translate the content of this page section by section to perfect? And here we have the translation. And now let's go back to Figma. And then let's open the local variables. And now we create a collection. And then we name this collection language. Now let's create a string variable. And now the first text we'll translate is research. So we call this string variable research. Now we create a mode by clicking here. And then we'll call this mode English. And then this one Arabic. Now we write here the word in English, which is research. And then here in Arabic. So let's go back to ChatGPT. Now let's copy this word in Arabic. And then let's paste it here. Now let's select this instance. And then let's go to the main component. Now let's select this menu item. All right. And then here in the properties panel, we click on this icon right here. And then we search for research. And then we apply this variable. Now here in the properties panel, we click on this icon right next to appearance, then language, then English. Now this little drop-down menu will appear. And then here we can switch between English and Arabic. All right. Now let's switch back this text to auto right here. And then let's go back to the design page. Now we select this frame. And then here in the properties panel, we click on this icon right here, and then language, and then Arabic. Brilliant. I will switch this back to auto. Now let's create the rest of the variables to translate all this content. And we'll do that by following the same process. All right, I'm here in the components page, and as you can see, I've added some of the translations, okay? And then here in the, in the info cards, okay? I'm here in the components page, all right? In the info cards, I've made some structural changes. And what I did was basically to separate this text, all right? And this title. So now they are in separate text fields. And I did this because when I added the translation right here, all right, I couldn't add this line break, okay, this space. So I solved the issue by changing the structure. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that in this case, all right, for these cards, you don't have to apply the variable here, okay, in the components page. You have to apply the variable in the instance. Here is where you apply the variables, all right? These are the instances. So after adding the variable here, okay, and then the translation, you select the text, in this case, this title. And then here in the properties panel, you apply the variable by clicking here, and then you can write Atom. And then this is the one we want right now, the title. So we click, and now it's applied, okay? We can see it here. Now, if I select this instance, and then here in the properties panel, I apply the variable, I change the language to Arabic, we can see it's working. And if you are wondering why we didn't apply the variables here, all right, in this instance, and it's because the header is the same on all pages, right? So we basically are using the same information we have here, okay? So this doesn't change. It doesn't matter if this is in the home page or the about page, the header and the items inside of the header will be the same. Okay, let's go back to the design page. And then if you are following along, feel free to continue applying the variables. All right, so here we have all the variables, and let's see if it's working. Let's select these 3 frames, and then here in the properties panel, we change the language to Arabic. Amazing. And then we can apply dark mode too. Sensational. We can change it back to English, and then back to light mode. Now let me show you something very nice. So let's create a frame right here. Something like this, right? And then I will change the language of this page to Arabic. Now I will select this instance, and then I will move it here. Look what happens. Automatically. And this happens because the default language is English, right? If we select this frame, and then we apply the language, you know, the Arabic language, it changes. Now let's see what happens if I create a frame, right? And then I set the page background color variable. So this one. And then I activate the dark mode. Let's see what happens if I start dropping elements inside. So this one, whoa. And then this one. This is amazing. And this happens because the components of these instances have the color modes set to auto. Okay, let me show you. Let's go to this component. And then here in the properties panel, we can see how the mode is set to auto, right? If we set it to light, for example, and then we go back to the instance, we can see how it doesn't matter what background color this frame has, this instance will show the light mode. Let me switch the component back to auto. Okay, so here we have this frame, right? And this frame is set to dark, okay? And then we have this frame, which is set to light, right? And then we have these 2 instances, right? And then the components of these instances have the variable mode set to auto, okay? As we just saw. So when we move these instances to this other frame, right? They inherit the mode of the parent, right? Which in this case is this frame, okay? Because it's set to light. So basically the frame acts as the parent, and then the instances that we place here act as the child, all right? And then if we change the mode of this frame, all right, we can see how the instances change as well. And then if we change the mode of the frame back to light, we can see how the instances inherit the mode we applied to the frame. Okay, now I will show you how to switch between modes on a page level, right? So instead of having to select the, these 3 frames and then switching it here, we can basically switch them on a page level all at once. Because here we only have 3 frames, right? The desktop breakpoint, and then we have the tablet breakpoint, and then the mobile breakpoint. But imagine we have like hundreds of pages, right? And each page has 3 breakpoints. We could select them all, right? But there is a more efficient way to do it. Let me show you here. When we click on the canvas and we deselect all these, frames, we can go to the properties panel right here, and then right next to page, we click on this icon, right? And then language, and then we change this to Arabic. And as you can see, it changes everywhere. And now if we want to change the mode to dark mode, it won't work, and I will show you why. So let's go here, and then we change this to dark mode, and it doesn't work, right? And that's because these frames are set to light, right? If we set them to auto, we can see how it changes, and now we can change it from here, okay? And once you have the mode here, right, and you want to basically switch the mode on one of these frames, you can do it by selecting the mode, selecting the frame, and then here you can basically apply the mode and it will work. Why? Because the frame will have priority over the page. All right, now I will show you how to set responsive typography variables. All right, so in the beginning of this module, I've shown you how to create different, text styles for different breakpoints, right? But this is not ideal. This is what most beginners do, right? And I wanted you to understand how to do it as well, because sometimes you will encounter it, right? But there is a better way to do it, and that's through variables and modes. So let's create a new variable collection, and then we'll name this collection typography. Now let's go to the design system page, and then here we have the typography right here. Okay, next we will basically delete all the text styles for mobile and then for tablet. All right, we only will leave the ones for desktop for now. So here we identify the last one for mobile, which is this one, and then we press and maintain shift, we click, and then now we go up, and then we identify the first one for tablet, which is this one, and then we press and maintain shift, and then we click, and now we have all these text styles selected. Now we right click, and then we click on delete. Now let's remove the desktop part of the name on all of these text styles, all right? On all of these. The names should look like this now. And now here inside of the typography collection, we create a new number variable. Now let's add a name to the variable. So we'll first add the name of the group, which is font, and then slash, and then the subgroup, which is font size, and then the first font size, which is display. Now we press enter, and then we have the structure. Now we create a new mode, and then another one, all right? And then we name this first mode desktop, and then this one tablet, and then this one mobile. The size for desktop is 160, and then for tablet is 88, and then for mobile is 44. Now we create the next one, which is H1. And then we do the same thing. Here it is. And now it's time to do the same thing with the rest of the sizes. Okay, so here we have all the font sizes. All right. And the next thing we have to do is create a new variable. And this time it should be a string variable. And then this one will be for the font family. So we create the subgroup, and then we write enter. and then we press enter. Here we have it. Sorry, here we shouldn't add the font family name, right? Here we should add title, and then here we should add the name of the font family, which is Inter. And here as well, because in this case we are using the same font family across all devices. All right, so we'll use this one for the title, and then we'll duplicate it, and then this one will be for the body text. And for this design, we are using the same font family for, for the title and then for the body text. Okay, I've added the rest of the variables, and as you can see here, under font family, I've added the font families for the display text, right? Because let's say in the future, we want to change the font family for the large display text. We can do it right here. And we have the, the font weight here as well. And you might be wondering why you didn't add the line height. And I didn't add the line height because at this moment in time, Figma doesn't allow us to add percentages here as values for the variables. They will probably make this possible in the future, but for now, we'll keep the line height percentage value in the text styles. Now let's make the text styles hold the variables. So let's close this. And then let's click here to open the settings of this text style right here. And then here where it says Inter, we click, and then we click on this icon. And then here we write font family. And then we click on display. Now we click on regular, and then we click here where it says apply variable. And then here we write font weight. And then we click on display. And then now we click here. And then we click on this icon, and then here we write font size, and then we click on display. Now we can close this. Now we click on this one, right? And then we do the same thing. We click here, and then we search for font family, and then this time we click on title, okay? Because this is a title. And then we click here, and then apply variable. And then we search for font weight, and then we click on H1. And then we click here, and then this icon again. And then we write font size, and then we click on H1. Now we close this, and then do the same thing in the rest of the text styles. Okay, so now these text styles are holding the typography variables, okay? What we have to do now is go to the components page. Now let's select the desktop variants. So we press and maintain Control, and then we press and maintain Shift. We click on this one, and then on this one, and then on this one. And then now in the properties panel, right next to appearance, we click on this icon, and then we hover over typography, and then we click on desktop. Now we do the same thing with the tablet one. So we select them, and then here in the properties panel, we do the same thing. And then this time we click on tablet. And now we do the same thing, but with the mobile one. And now the buttons. So these ones, we set them to desktop. And then these ones, tablet, and then these ones, mobile. All right, I've just noticed a little oversight, and it's that I'm using the same font size in the buttons for tablet and then for mobile. And I've noticed because obviously the font size in the mobile buttons should be a little bit smaller, right? But no worries, because fixing this is very easy. Let's do it right now. Let's go to the design system page. And then here we can see how the font size for the buttons in the tablet breakpoint should be 20 pixels. And then in the mobile breakpoint should be 18 pixels. Let's go back to the components page. And then let's open the variables. And then let's update the value in the button text font size for the mobile breakpoint, 18 pixels. And now this makes sense. Now let me show you something extremely nice. So we have these two frames, right? This one is the desktop breakpoint, and then this one is the mobile breakpoint, okay? And then we have a text with the display text style. If I select this text and then I move it here, nothing happens, right? But then let's see what happens if I select this frame and then I click here, this icon, and then I hover over typography, and then I click on mobile. Then I select this text and then I move it here. Did you see that? And then if I move it back to the mobile breakpoint, it changes automatically. Amazing. And the same thing happens with instances. If we take this instance and then we move it here in the mobile breakpoint, we can see how the text size changes, right? It becomes smaller. If we move it back to the desktop breakpoint, we can see how the text size increases. In this lesson, you've learned what a design system is, what the atomic design system is and how to use it, and how to create a design system from scratch. Let's move to the next lesson. Components are the building blocks of any design system, ensuring consistency and scalability across projects. In this lesson, you will learn how to effectively document components in Figma, making them intuitive and easy to use for designers and developers. Documentation in design is the process of creating a structured guide that explains how a design system, its elements, and its processes work. It includes details about design decisions, components, guidelines, and the best practices to ensure consistency, clarity, and effective collaboration across teams. Documentation can be a broad topic, right? But in this lesson, we'll specifically focus on component documentation. So basically how to document the technical aspects of individual components to make them clear, usable, and accessible for everyone. Component documentation can be very tedious, right? And if we have a large collection of components, it can take a long time for us to really document everything, right? To make sure that every technical aspect is clear. So I want to show you this plugin that helps us tremendously in terms of efficiency and speed when documenting the specs of our components. To install the plugin, simply click on this icon right here, and then click on plugins and widgets, and then search for specs, and then install this one. So click on this one, and then click on run. Now with the plugin open, click on any component. So we select this component, and then we click on run. And now here we have all the technical specs of the component, and everything is very detailed, right? We have all the information. If we had to document all these one by one, it would take a lot of time, right? So this plugin helps us a lot in terms of efficiency. This plugin is amazing. Like, as I said, it saves us a lot of time. Make sure to install it and play with it so you can see how it works. In this lesson, you've learned what documentation is and how to document components automatically in Figma. Alright, congratulations on finishing Module 11. In the next module, I will give you advice on how to have successful meetings with potential and existing clients. Thanks for your attention, and I will see you soon.